Hello friends, this is Harren Appleman, your friendly engineering and marketing consultant here at Nakamichi Research USA with the second edition of Nakamichi Spoken Here. I had to go quite fast last time to fit everything I wanted to say on one side of a C60, but this time I'll try to slow the pace down a little. The last time I spoke about our philosophy, our machines and tapes. And one of the things I mentioned was the fact that our machines represented long-term investments. That is to say that although gradual improvements will be made, there would never be any drastic changes in the styling or the specifications of our machines. And there's a reason for this policy. See, our cassette decks are only part of a larger picture. To Mr. Nakamichi, making the best cassette decks in the world is not an end in itself. Mr. Nakamichi envisioned an entire system of hardware, software, and recording know-how utilizing the cassette medium long before we even put out the Nakamichi Model 1000. Right now, about 90%, I would say, that's a conservative estimate, about 90% of all Nakamichi owners use their Nakamichi cassette decks to dub records or record off the air. And although both these sources have gotten quite good in recent times, I doubt that people who are doing only that is dubbing off FMN records, I doubt if those people really realize the full potential of Nakamichi machines. The present pre-recorded material, and that's not just records, but also pre-recorded tapes. And I'm talking about FM too, of course, since FM stations just broadcast records and tapes, basically. These pre-recorded materials mainly suffer from limited dynamic range, frequency response, and high distortion. But more than that, what bothers us is a trend in the recording industry towards fabricated sound. This is where your recording engineer becomes an artist, more so than the artists themselves who are performing. Now, this is alright for providing emotional listening experiences, but it seems to us that the purpose behind low coloration, and I mentioned in our first tape that low coloration was one of our goals, whether it be speakers, microphones, electronics, our tape decks. The purpose behind low coloration, it seems, is quickly becoming lost in a maze of artificial sound enhancement techniques such as equalization, reverberation, compression, multi-microphone techniques. Now, all these techniques can help make more listenable recordings, even if your goal is to make natural sounding recordings. These techniques can help, but with very few exceptions, we think most recordings suffer from what maybe I'd call runaway sound enhancement. What we'd like to advocate, what we are advocating, is a return to certain basics in recording. That is, to capture the live sound. And I think those of you who attend a lot of live performances will know what I mean when I say there's a difference between a live performance and a studio performance. There's just something in that live performance which is missing in the studio version. And this is the sound that we want to capture. At the CES in Chicago last month, in June, we introduced what would be the next phase of our program. We introduced our microphones, and that's the Electret and the studio condenser microphones. We introduced monitoring headphones and loudspeakers, and a booklet explaining our recording system. In the future, we'd like to perhaps publish more advanced booklets on recording, and also we'll be coming up with a software program of our own and that is our own pre-recorded tapes on the Nakamichi label. These will be made from sources that we'll be collecting within the next year or so, and they'll be dubbed 1-to-1 at 1 7/8. It's an expensive process. The tapes themselves will be expensive, and we don't expect that our software program really generate that much business for us, at least for a while. But we do feel that we have to take this step, and that this is something which others will follow. Others will be following in our footsteps, we believe, perhaps in about 3 years or so. We've already changed a lot of minds about the cassette itself. It didn't used to be a serious tape recording medium. But in the same manner, we feel that we can change a lot of people's minds about pre-recorded cassettes. I'd like to talk a little now about the Nakamichi recording system. What we're trying to do is encourage more live recording. I think people who haven't gone out and done this will be surprised at how easily they can come up with recordings that sound a lot better in a lot of ways than most of your pre-recorded material that's out on the market now. One of the questions that's asked most about our machines is why we have 3 microphone inputs, and I mentioned this a little bit in our first tape. In order to understand why 3, and this is part of our 3 microphone recording system, you have to understand the difference between stereo and binaural. There seems to be a lot of experimentation going on in binaural recording these days. By binaural, I mean that 2-channel recording, and that's usually done with 2 microphones inside a dummy head, and it's reproduced over headphones. You listen to a binaural recording over headphones, otherwise it doesn't mean anything. Stereo is different, mainly in the regard that you would produce a stereo recording over loudspeakers. Now, the fact is it's very difficult to make stereo recordings with just 2 microphones. And this sounds strange to a lot of people, but this is true. Only in a very reverberant hall, or such as a church, for example. In this case, binaural and stereo are fairly close together. In a church or a very reverberant hall, it's possible to make a successful stereo recording with 2 microphones, but otherwise it's very difficult. For example, let's take a solo singer on stage. The soloist would be, the microphones would be positioned either, in the binaural case, you have the 2 microphones spaced about 12 inches apart, fairly close to the singer. You would get in stereo now. That recording would sound as if the singer had a mouth 10 feet wide. The other extreme is if the microphones are placed further away and separated further, you would have a left and a right, but a hollow middle, and the impression is that the soloist is in 2 places at one time. You get around this by using 3 microphones, and I'll give examples of this later on. But why 3, you ask? Why not use more, like the professionals do? Well, it's not that easy, and I think the proof is right there in some of these so-called professional recordings, which are far from successful as far as I'm concerned, in the sense that they do not capture the live sound. We think that with 3 microphones you can cover the majority of recording situations. Now, should the 3 microphones be omnidirectional or cardioid? That's a question that's often asked, and what I'd like to say here is that there's nothing inherently better about cardioid microphones. If you have reason to use a cardioid microphone, and that's a unidirectional microphone that rejects some of the rear sound, if there's good reason to use a cardioid, we'll use a cardioid. What we prefer, for example, is for close miking, we prefer an omnidirectional, because then you get around the proximity effect, which is a problem with cardioid microphones. A proximity effect is the boosting of lower frequencies when a cardioid microphone gets close to a sound source. You might want to use a cardioid microphone for the stereo mics, for the left and right, if they're placed out away from the stage and there's an audience, and you want to cut down on some of the audience noise, a cardioid mic is useful there. Let me give you a couple of examples of how you might use the 3 microphone system. For example, in recording a piano solo, For the blend microphone, that's your center mic channel, you would use perhaps an omnidirectional microphone right inside the piano, and it would be there to pick up the direct sounds from the piano, so you get the percussive quality capture the percussive quality of the piano. The stereo microphones would be out further in the audience, and they would capture the hall ambience and the natural ambience of the piano. Now, there's the case where you need wider coverage. The blend microphone in the first example was the main microphone. It captured the direct sounds from the instrument. There are situations where that would be reversed. If you were recording a vocal quartet, for example, one microphone isn't enough because you need wider coverage. You would use the stereo microphones as the direct pickup, and then your blend microphone would be further back to capture the ambience in the hall and so forth. The same would be true of an organ in a church, for example. You'd want to use your stereo microphones as the main pickup and use the blend microphone as the ambience pickup. There are a lot more examples in the booklet that we published called Nakamichi Recording System, and in that we explain in detail some of the things I just mentioned, Y3 microphones, the difference between omnidirectional and cardioid, and it gives a lot more examples of how you would use the 3 microphone system in specific recording situations. We also introduced monitoring headphones, the Nakamichi monitoring headphones at the CES. Why monitoring headphones? Well, mainly because they're meant for use in on-location recording when you don't have loudspeakers to monitor with. How do they differ from other headphones? Well, you can't monitor very easily with headphones that, for example, have boosted lows and highs, and this is very common among even your so-called high-fidelity headphones. You have your boosted lows and highs, and that makes it very difficult to set levels, to set your microphones. You have to have a fairly flat headphone. Also, you can't monitor with the open back type headphones, the foam headphones, because they don't give you any isolation from outside noise. And in this respect, also, you have to have headphones that can deliver a lot of sound pressure level without clipping, and they have to be fairly efficient because you're not going to be carrying a power amplifier around with you just to drive headphones. So that's why we use dynamic drivers inside the Nakamichi headphones. They get very loud and they're very efficient. And also they are the closed back type, and so that they give you isolation from external noise. But we've maintained the comfort. They're very comfortable, they're very light, and we suggest you take a pair and try them. Many people like it for home use too. It's not just for monitoring. We say it's for monitoring, but of course you can use it at home. Many people prefer the natural sound that these monitoring headphones offer. I'd like to talk a little bit now about our microphones. We introduced 2 microphones at the CES. Our CM300, which is our electret condenser microphone, and the CM1000, which is our studio condenser microphone. The CM300 we think is a unique electret microphone. It's probably the best electret on the market. In what way is it so good? Well, I've personally had a lot of experience. I was fortunate in back in my college days to have a lot of time to do live recording, and of course, since I've been with Nakamichi, I've had ample opportunity to try various microphones and evaluate them. And electrets have always always left kind of a bad taste in my mouth. Electrets always seem to have that kind of electret sound, compressed and nasal, and also they never were able to handle much sound pressure level. Well, we've changed all that, I think, with our microphones. There is no electret sound. The RCM300, for example, can handle 138 dB sound pressure level, which is extremely high for any kind of microphone, let alone an electret. The basic CM300, you can buy it as singly, and you can also buy it in a set of 3, which of course is meant to go with our cassette machines, which have the 3 microphone inputs. The microphone will come with a windscreen, cable, battery, stand adapter, and each microphone will come with 2 capsules, an omnidirectional and a cardioid capsule. You also have optional capsules. By capsules, I mean just the front portion of the microphone unscrews, and so with the same basic microphone body, you can have various kinds of microphones. You have your omnidirectional and your cardioid, and then you can buy the optional capsules, which are the pinpoint, which is a super omnidirectional capsule, and we also have the super directional or the shotgun capsule. The pinpoint capsule is a source of a lot of confusion. People say, what do you mean by super omnidirectional? Well, the fact of the matter is it's funny to call that a super omnidirectional. The fact is that is really omnidirectional, and most of your so-called omnidirectional microphones really aren't omnidirectional. The super omnidirectional microphone has a very small diaphragm, a small diameter diaphragm, and this gives you much truer omnidirectional response, especially to higher frequencies. The shotgun capsule, we believe, is one of the finest shotgun types on the market. It has unusually excellent high-frequency response. Now, our studio condenser microphone, the CM1000, was developed mainly for our own use, for our software program, which I mentioned earlier, for the master tapes that we were going to be making for release under the Nakamichi label. Before we developed those microphones, we had been using Neumann, AKG, so forth, all excellent microphones, but we ran into a lot of problems with humidity, for example, especially in Japan, when your humidity is very high. Humidity seems to have an adverse effect on condenser microphones, and also lack of consistency. Even these very fine microphones, from one sample to another, would have a very different sort of sound. We believe that with our CM1000, we've licked most of these problems, and we think that in that respect, it's one of the finest condenser microphones on the market right now, and we're making it available to the public. It also uses the capsule, the module theory. You can interchange the capsules. Right now, we only have the omnidirectional and that's the super omnidirectional and the cardioid capsules, but we will have more interchangeable capsules available in the future. We also introduced the monitoring loudspeakers at the CES, the Nakamichi reference monitor, and this is a controversial thing, we feel. It's a two-way loudspeaker with no crossover network, no electrical crossover network. It's all done mechanically. It was developed quite a while ago, about 18 years ago, by the NHK, which is the Japanese BBC, and the Mitsubishi Electric Corporation. Mr. Nakamichi decided to import this speaker, if for no other reason, to show people that there are in fact good loudspeakers being made in Japan. We use this loudspeaker also for our software program. It is our reference monitor. We have it in our studios, and we use them for on-location monitoring. Mr. Nakamichi personally uses a pair of these loudspeakers in his home, and recently I've listened to nothing else but these loudspeakers. Before I knew of these loudspeakers, I had a preference towards low coloration, and in that sense, I tended to prefer a lot of the British loudspeakers, the BBC monitors, for example. Prefer them to and certainly anything made in the United States. But also at the same time, I was surprised to find that such loudspeakers were being made in Japan, and the Nakamichi reference monitor, in that sense, is a very low coloration loudspeaker. At the same time, it's very efficient and has high power handling capability. It's a very analytical loudspeaker, which is necessary for monitoring recordings. By analytical, I mean the speaker is going to sound as bad as your sources are. It's more of a measuring instrument than it is anything else. It's a very expensive unit, and frankly, we had our doubts about how many we're going to sell in this country, but we had some very encouraging developments. Within a week after the speaker's debut at the Consumer Electronics Show, one of our leading dealers in Manhattan, New York, the Electronic Workshop, sold 7 pairs within 1 week after the show to very critical professional users, one of whom is Stevie Wonder. We also have a smaller version of this loudspeaker. It's basically just a scaled down version for use in smaller studios. and where power handling capacity isn't quite so important. We don't really expect all our dealers to handle this loudspeaker, and also we're going to be careful about who handles them because, like I mentioned before, since they will sound bad, as your sources are, there's a problem with demonstrating them. We can't send samples of these speakers around, unfortunately. They're a little bit too big and too expensive to do so. But if anybody is interested in these loudspeakers, please call either our New York office or our Santa Monica office, and we'll arrange for you to listen to these speakers one way or another. The reverse side of this tape, once again, will be a demonstration tape. The demonstration tape this time was taken from two sources, both of which were recorded using the Nakamichi live recording system. Using the 3-microphone system, we used the 3 condenser microphones, the studio condenser microphones, CM1000, and the recording was mastered on our professional cassette recorder, the Studio Z. The first will be selections from Violin Recital, which was given in Tokyo. The violinist is yours truly, and well, it's not Heifetz, but I hope you enjoy it. The second is selections from a harpsichord recording, which Mr. Nakamichi made quite recently in New York. In our next edition of Nakamichi Spoken Here, we hope to deal with suggestions from you. Please write in with any questions, comments, anything that which you feel might be of interest to other dealers. We'd like to address our future tapes to those topics. So please feel free to write to me at care of the Santa Monica office. Thanks for listening.